War I started in 1914 with the improbable cause of global war being the assassination of the Austrian Archduke. With this, the world slowly descended into conflict, war racing across Europe into its colonies, including the Middle East. The Middle East was ripe for imperialist proxy wars, with its important location and protectorates and colonies of European powers. As the war raged on, two empires came to true power over the region, Britain and France. As they debated among themselves, they focused on a certain region of conflict, Greater Syria. This region includes modern-day Syria, Israel, Palestine, Jordan, and Lebanon. Its regional importance dates back to the Ottoman Empire, which, as time would later prove, would not last through the First World War. It had been a special district, fought over by factions of the Ottoman Empire. Once Britain and France became involved, it was no different. In the historical context, the First World War and its constant question in the Middle East of who would control which territory was happening in a very crowded political moment. Not only were imperialist powers betting on the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, Zionist and Arab nationalist movements were gaining power in Europe and in the Middle East, respectively. While the imperialists wanted glory and power, the later groups were more focused on a homeland and self-control. The imperial powers from Europe, Britain and France specifically, wanted, in short, economic and social power. They moved in a careful balancing act, always trying to outpace one another, but careful not to upset the balance of powers. Greater Syria proved a perfect place for such politics. Zionism had been born out of the persecution of Jewish communities across Europe, and the 2,000-year diaspora from what was then known as Judea, till the Romans conquered it and renamed the land Palestine. They had one goal, a Jewish state, where once the kingdom of David and Solomon had been there. The Arab nationalist movement was born of a desire for a land for Arabs, ruled by Arabs, and created by Arabs. Gone would be the days of distant rule from Constantinople, of the influence of European powers. A new Arab empire would emerge, born from the ashes of the Ottomans, and a renaissance of Arab ideals and traditions would occur in the region. With the Ottoman Empire teetering on the edge of collapse, these groups took advantage and started to claim sections of the Arabian Peninsula as rightfully theirs. Among the Arab nationalists, Hussein emerged as a prominent proponent for an independent Arab state. He approached Great Britain, and in a series of letters with a British official, McMahon, a rough deal over the Arabian Peninsula was created, in exchange for aid against the Ottoman Empire, who had sided with the Germans, Britain's enemy. Britain would relinquish land from the Arabian Peninsula to Hussein, in which to create an Arab nation. As fate would have it, or simply sheer statistics, this Arab nation Hussein was working to create did not have the support of many on the ground in Greater Syria. This was largely in part because Hussein, like all the other powers grabbing land in this era, had little thought or care what the average person living in the territories he claimed wanted. A young Muslim man from Jerusalem described what life was like during the war, where the common people had no control over what was deciding the fate of their home. The city today is decorated in the most beautiful way. All the shops are lighted up in celebration of this holiday. Wouldn't it be better if the government didn't do that and mourned together with its subjects? Wouldn't it be better to spend this money on the poor and miserable? The core of his sentiment is the principle that hungry people don't make for happy subjects. While his frustration had little to do directly with the Hussein McMahon talks, it shows clearly that for the average person, the fate of Greater Syria was something they had no ability to shape. It was not only Hussein who was cutting out the common person in land deals. Britain and France created an agreement that completely ignored the sovereignty and right of self-determination for anyone and everyone in Greater Syria. The Sykes-Picot Agreement is a preeminent example of the imperialism seen not only throughout the First World War, but in the Middle East especially. Britain and France were not interested in letting their prior interests in the Middle East gutter out during the war. They had no qualms about cutting out Middle Eastern perspectives entirely. It was for this reason they split the Greater Syrian region into both areas of direct control under Britain and France and spheres of influence. that in Area A, France, and in Area B, Great Britain, shall alone supply advisors or foreign functionaries at the request of the Arab state or Confederation of Arab States. That in the blue area, France, and in the red area, Great Britain, shall be allowed to establish such direct or indirect administration or control as they desire, and as they may think fit to arrange with the Arab state or Confederation of Arab States. The lines they drew on the map had little to do with what was right for the people living there, or for what the cultural traditions had been, and everything to do with Britain and France's interests. The random drawing of lines did not stop at spheres of influence and protectorates, but extended even to nation building. The country of Transjordan was created in Greater Syria in 1916 to suit the interests of Britain and France. Its creation was, nonetheless, an important turning point in the region's history. Now land deals not only dealt with existing nations or those who already wished to create nations in the region, now land deals could lead to the creation of nation regardless of what people in the region wanted, purely for the sake of easier politics and imperialism. By 1917, as the war effort was drawing to a close in Europe and the Middle East, there were still efforts by the imperialist powers to protect against all future possibilities. One of the ways Britain did this in the Middle East was with the Balfour Declaration. It stated in quick terms, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. Vague enough to support any outcome of what was to become of the Palestine sub-region of Greater Syria, Britain insulated itself from unlike outcomes as well as more commonly assumed inevitable ones. While personal accounts from the life of Lord Balfour indicate he had Zionist leanings himself and wanted to see the dawn of a Jewish state, the broader reception was much less partisan. At the time, it gave little power, politically or otherwise, to any specific group aside from the nominal legitimization of the Zionist population in Palestine and Britain. As it would happen, from this humble, if obscure beginning, the Balfour Declaration would be of paramount importance under the Second World War and the atrocities of the Holocaust. Despite the many agreements and arrangements made between Western powers and various other groups, the question of who would control Greater Syria was never definitively solved during the First World War, or after, with controversies over the land eventually morphing into the tensions and wars seen in the region today. Inevitably, European interests appeared to take precedence over deals made with those in the Middle East, or other groups looking to return largely to the Middle East. However, confusion even amongst European powers prevented the land deals from ever reaching a satisfactory ending for the nations involved, not to mention for the people in the region being fought over by distant lands who had no say in any of the proceedings. This legacy of violence and external control begs the question, after gallons of blood, thousands of dead, or hundreds of words on paper, was all the fighting during and after the war over the land really worth it? Just what is the price of land?